So you don't know us, maybe we should quickly say hello. I'm David Durfee, the chair of the committee from Shaftesbury in Bennington County. And let's just go around.
I'm Rodney Graham, represent Orange 3, and I'm Williamstown and Charleston.
Jed Lipsky, represent Memorial 1, Stowe.
David Templeman, Brownington, Barton, and Westport.
Mike Rice, Bennington Rutland District, towns of Danby, Dorset, Land Grove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
John O'Brien, Rutland, Tunbridge.
And we've met.
Heather Spina, Vice Chair, Windsor 4, which is the towns of Byron, Pomfret, Bridgewater.
Okay.
And we have a committee member online, possibly. Representative Levitt may not be there. Okay. Well, let's go ahead.
And I'll introduce myself. I'm Kimberly Hagan. I was with UVM Extension for 10 years as a grazing specialist. And actually, I was just thinking about listening to Laura. I'm going to date myself here. I wrote, back when I was a journalist, wrote one of the first pieces about the Abermark and Hood merger, back when that happened, which changed the picture in the state considerably for dairy. So it's really interesting having seen all the changes that have happened over the years. And another way, I worked in this State House as well, and probably even before Gaslight, I was back here when there was candlelight.
I don't believe either of you.
So this is a new project that I'm working on with Dan. And I jumped on board with this, having worked in agriculture in this state for many years and seeing the changes and the pressures on farmers pretty close up, working on as a grazing specialist. And I just see that this is a way that can really change the picture for the working farmer if we're going to remain competitive in this world. It's a huge time and labor saving device. And I really felt pretty invested in it personally to see that we do what we can to support this change and get this tool into the hands of small farmers, because a lot of them, there's no way they're going to ever be able to afford an extra labor set of hands. So this is a way to gain that extra set of hands. I have a lot of farmers that have been calling me about this, very, very excited by the idea. So I guess we're going to look at a little clip.
Okay, so just a little background to what this illustrates. To your point, strolling of the heifers during the pandemic kind of hit the wall in terms of the parade. Roger Albee, who many of you may know, was this Secretary of Agriculture under Governor Douglas. He's the board chair for strolling. And he decided that the assets that strolling had could be used for a different purpose because the parade wasn't going to come back, and decided to investigate the idea of establishing a think tank for agricultural technology. And he asked me as a lawyer to help him think through the legal issues that were involved in transforming strolling from a 501c3 with an educational purpose built around the parade to a 501c3 built around this new concept of agricultural technology. One thing led to another, as it often does, and Roger asked me if I would step in and take the frontline load in setting up the Institute in addition to doing the legal piece of it. So that conversation was about 2 years ago. And I in the interim time, we came up with a concept, and the concept, it really has kind of two governing pieces. The first is that it's organized around smaller farms. No criticism or aspersion intended to be cast to larger farms, just a concentration on agriculture technology built around smaller farms. Second is that the technology that we would be looking out to promote would be innovative, and innovative in two respects. One, to promote farm financial viability. To Kimberly's point, this should have significant impact on labor, and that's the tie here, and other cost savings. And the second is technologies that had in mind the capability to enable smaller farms in aggregate to combat climate change. So farm viability plus climate change is the mission statement of the Institute. So that's the concept. The Strolling Board decided to provide seed funding over a 2-year period of time to get the Institute up and on its feet. And in the use of the funding was to formalize the process both legally and institutionally. So I've been fundraising, and the Strolling got renamed to be the Agritech Institute. We've notified the IRS. So a lot of formalities involved in getting the Institute up and running. At the same time, trying to advance the Institute's mission. And so the idea was to identify a first demonstration project for what the Institute is intending to do. And so the Institute is a think tank, involves academic research. In this case, yours truly did the academic research, and primarily, and second, on-farm experimentation. So when I say yours truly talked to a lot of people, did not talk to Kimberly. Unbeknownst, she had been looking into virtual fencing for a long time. So we met down the road, but I came up with the idea of a pilot project for virtual fencing, approached the Linalac Foundation, because one of the benefits of the fencing is if you are able to improve the animal management, you can have a better control over the animals involved with sensitive areas on the farm, which could improve the management of water quality on the farm. So that's the Linalac primary concern of the Linalac Foundation. CRE was very supportive, put up some seed funding, which enabled me to think about a pilot project for two smaller farms. At the same time, I approached the Dairy Innovation Center, and they've put up $60,000 in addition. So I now have 2 blocks of money. Bringing in the Innovation Center allowed me to increase the kind of overall reach of this, which meant bringing in a professional. So I approached Kimberly as a grazing specialist about serving as a technical support for this. And so we're now collaborating. And so, as I said to you, I'm the generalist, and it's really helpful to me to be able to hand off the specialty of the grazing and how it will work with the animals. I have been raising beef cows on my property for 15 years, so I have some firsthand knowledge of what's involved in managing animals, which has proved to be quite useful in this exercise. So when I did the research, I looked at 4 different companies that are providing, that are supplying virtual fencing to the market in North America. No Fence is a Norwegian company. I decided to pursue a contract with them because they're long into this in Europe. The technology is established, pretty well established and rolled out in Europe for commercial application. There are, let's see if they actually tell you how many farms. Different slide, but there are literally thousands of animals that are using the equipment in Europe at this point. They have been piloting in the United States for 2 years, and I get in the tail end of the pilot. Kimberly and I are going to, there it is. That's the, yeah. So they're up to 59,000 animals at this point in Europe over a 10-year period of time. The No Fence is doing a pilot in North America over the past 2 years, is primarily in the Midwest, in Iowa and Wisconsin. I get in on the tail end. Vermont is, as far as I know, we're the only part in the Northeast that are involved with No Fence. So Kimberly and I in 2 weeks are going on the farm. The collars are coming on Thursday, and we're going on the farm and install the collars on the first farm a week from Monday. So that's very exciting. We're right to the jump off point after kind of a 2-year period of time. So the way it works is I'm using their website because it's really pretty cool. So this is the virtual fence. There we go. So see in a minute, there's the virtual line there, over here. So the cow approaches that and gets an auditory sound. If it goes farther, then it gets a shock. So it's a 2-stage, it's a virtual line. That line is set using your phone. So you move the line, you have your phone, you got the GPS satellite up in the sky, and you set the boundary lines. So there's no post and wire fencing. In the ideal, there's no post and wire fencing. And you can move it right off your phone. So that the opportunity for improved rotational grazing, is pretty obvious. That instead of having to go out there and manually set that line, you can literally set the line on your phone. So the pilot is, in essence, you'll have a farm that has a virtual fence around an actual post and wire backup perimeter fence. So you've got a backup to make sure if something goes awry, the fence is still there, the animals know the fence. And then you work with the animals to become familiar with this notation system. So, let's see here. So the animal starts to approach, and as the animal approaches, the GPS notifies the animal's collar. The animal's wearing a collar, and the animal receives a sound, an auditory sound, and it's calibrated in speed and volume to equate to how the cow approaches the line. So if the cow is running, the sound goes up very quickly and becomes much louder. It's just kind of strolling like that. It's a little bit quiet. And then if the animal hits the line, it gets a shock. But the shock is not designed to knock the animal down. It's just designed as a notification. The animal if the animal has to evade a predator, it can do that. So the shock is not so extensive as to preclude that from happening. And then the animal can actually come back in. The shocking and sound doesn't happen on the way back. So for animals that have,
Pretty amazing.
Jump the line and do that, run away, and then want to come back and then freak out and can't figure out because they can't remember where they came in, that's not a problem with this deal. If they see the herd on the other side of the line, they say, oh, good, we can come back in. So the company has clearly thought through a lot of the pieces of what's involved with this. And I would say that plus the fact that you know where your animals are. Here we go. I think that's you can monitor your animals. So all of those little dots there, those are animals. So those two features, I think, are what got Senator Starr and Senator
Westman.
West, thank you. I've seen you moment. Thank you. Got Richie and Bobby interested in it. They chased animals as a kid. And so the animals go down the road and you don't know where they are. Well, now you know where they are. And the second thing is that for the animals to be they're out in the pucker brush and you know where they are. I really think I watched Bobby and Richie's eyes light up when they saw that, and you could see from when they were kids. That was pretty interesting. And the second thing is that the animals can come back in. So you don't have that chaos of when animals. So that's my sort of observation. That's what grabbed their attention. So that's the gist of Kimberly can fill in, but that's the animal management idea. And I think if you can see that if you set up your perimeter and you have a sensitive area on your farm, instead of having to kind of be broad in how you're keeping animals out of that sensitive area, this can be much more tailored to the area. so that you can have a more efficient use of your land and bring some land back into production, but at the same time have the certainty that the animals will be kept out of that sensitive area because they have that boundary. The anchor of this deal to begin with is the Lenalac Foundation and water quality. So that's an important piece. And I would say another important piece is that, and Kimberly will speak to this more than I, but improved grazing improves the forage, the plant health, which both increases carbon capture, mineral capture on land. So that's the beginning tie into the climate issue. And that's part of our pilot is to assess that. But in addition is the improved pasture management of being able to more efficiently manage your animals, is a big improvement for pasture management, which should benefit the farm's profitability in a number of ways. The most obvious is you're not out there, however many times you are putting up and taking down fences. So
I laugh because I do that 4 hours a day during the seasons.
here you are. So we need to hear more about that.
Representative.
And it was really amazing, but unlike invisible fence where they bury a few inches of
Yeah,
wiry string under the
you get it. Yes.
zero that, what are these white dots that sort of are directing, tangents? Is there any technology there or it's all up in the?
No, it's just the benchmark points that you put in. So you put that plug in that line, then you're going to draw your line. That's all with your phone.
Where is the electrical energy current coming from?
So I left out one piece. It's cellular. So the phone is operating off your cellular connection. So it's not an internet connection. Your GPS from the satellite to the cow and your cellular from your phone to the cow. So you are setting this to the cow's collar and up to the GPS through cellular.
Where's the electrical current?
The battery in the
It's the
collar.
battery.
Oh, it's there carrying it.
Yes.
That's what looks like a collar.
Yeah, no, I've done,
So
And I'm sorry, but
coloring elephants and everything,
yeah.
And not for electrical shock, but to watch their migration trans frontier.
They have a battery in the collar, so
Oh,
yeah, so that's
And
good.
it's.
So are they solar? Are they solar batteries or rechargeable?
These are,
Rechargeable, or just batteries?
they are maybe a 2-year.
So that's the other reason. The companies are rechargeable and they're also solar. So they have a solar,
Oh, man.
they have a solar collector right on the collar. And the biggest drain, and then I got to stop talking, but it's pretty exciting so I could talk for a while, but I'll stop. The biggest drain is actually the cellular. If the cellular goes in and out, then the phone is notifying the user that your cell's down. You might want to think about that. Then it goes back up and that's drawn on so that's actually, so if you have reasonable cellular coverage, the thinking is it could be good for a whole grazing season without having to come in and recharge the batteries. So that's the.
And the other thing, because you brought up the carbon sequestration point where the farmer learns the optimum to avoid overgrazing, where you deplete or burn or, so you can control
So if
value in it, not with the water quality and the carbon.
Can I turn you over to Kimberly? Since you're evaluating this, we went from Lenalac to DBI to the Dairy Innovation Center, and now the legislature on the Senate side put in some money. The money that they put in is to expand this from just cattle. So these collars, one set of collars is cattle. Then there's a smaller set of collars for sheep and goats. And the additional money is to allow us to pilot for those additional animals. And the application is different. Sheep and goats can do solar array management, right-of-ways for utilities is the thinking.
Grazing in solar
Correct.
farms.
Yeah, and also on ski slopes. So we're looking to pilot, and the additional funding will allow us to do that. So that's the my side, the Institute's rollout. Bringing Kimberly in allows her to speak more to your question, and I turn over the table.
Representative Rice had a question.
Just on a quick question, as we're still touching on the cellular piece, do we have data? Is there an overlay map that shows Vermont's grazing land and cellular coverage?
Well, that's a
really
great
good question.
great question, and so
Smart as that.
I'm actually working to do that with the Public Service Board's got a kind of a carve out that's primarily for cellular coverage to see where resources need to be. And we're trying to build an overlay of farms into that. So that's what I'm working on. And so then the next iteration would be grazing to that. It's obviously a condition precedent for farms being able to participate in the pilots. They've got to have cell correction. So, but we all know, there are some holes, and so in order to do this, that's an important step back piece. Absolutely. Yeah, great question.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to go back because I think this is an important piece about the whole carbon. And so one of the things that's been in the years that I worked as a grazing, helping people to become good grazers is it requires a certain amount of walking. You got to get off the tractor and you got to walk, and you also have to set up fencing. So, and that all takes time. So the time and labor to do that. So there are so few people that actually do good grazing management. And that's essential for the whole climate piece of this. So by being able to move animals faster, we can keep the soil in better condition, and we can sequester carbon. Although I will say that it's one of the things that still no one has figured out a really great way to measure that. That's still in progress. But we can look at it by proxy through taking soil samples and looking at the health of the soil, and that can give us an indication of how much carbon is being stored. But we don't know how to exactly measure it just yet. But by moving animals faster and through a landscape quicker, we keep everything intact. And the thing that I do see when we have these heavy precipitation events, we need to move the animals really fast because they stay in one place, they'll rip it up. It gets soft. We don't have deep soils here. We've got next to nothing. So we got to move them fast. And then when it's, dry, we want to slow them down and give pieces a little more time to recover, because that recovery time is so important. So I just wanted to get back to that.
Thanks.
So I'm a regenerative sheep farmer that I have a grazing plan. I move my sheep sometimes up to twice a day. One of my biggest concerns about this technology, and it's something I've been following for a number of years now, is the fencing isn't just to keep the grazing animals in place, but it's to keep the predators out.
Right.
So with my small ruminants, I can't see how this would work for me unless I had a similar thing for my guard dogs. Do they have it?
So this is a big question because I'm also, I'm actually just retired. I had sheep for 35 years. So, yeah.
What breed?
I've tried them all. One of the things I would say is that this is still something that we're working on, and we're hoping when we get the second batch of callers later in the summer season, we have 2 sheep farmers, well, 1 goat, 1 sheep, that, we hope to address this. I know that in Norway, with this company, it was developed by a sheep farmer and engineer. He was the one who developed this because it's pretty hard to get a fence post in Norway. And the steepness, it's really hard. So that's why it came out of that need. So I know they've dealt with it because they do have predators there.
Yeah.
So it's a question I have into them. to ask. Meantime, my thoughts are that for the trials that we're going to do, that we'll have a big perimeter and we can at least do this internal division
Right.
and move them around.
Yeah, you were mentioning that, like a perimeter fence.
Yes. Yeah, so we start with cattle where it's not really an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're gonna pilot smaller ruminants, then the perimeter fence probably plays a more important role.
However,
At least to start.
at a ski resort, under power lines, you don't have that fence there. So it's still an open question.
Absolutely.
And then the dogs could play a part in it. The problem is a lot of dogs, like my Maremas, they will not keep a collar on, no matter what, no matter how tight it is. They'll work together to get them off.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's,
So that's the kind of open question and the problem potentially that this doesn't fix.
so that's the idea of pilot, right? So-
Right.
We'd figure out. But the thoughts I had on that too are that, because I've had a lot of chats with Bolton Valley, because we've been wanting to do this, I've been wanting to do this for years. And one thought was that they could be out during the day, but we would bring them back into, like they do in Europe, they'll bring them back to an encampment for the night.
But then you're spreading parasites, right? Potentially.
Potentially, but I think you're dropping the, if you do your grazing right, you can do it in such a way that you really drop that issue pretty quickly between genetics and your management style.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do it.
I'm just thinking of pathways that they use repeatedly. That's usually where you get the load of, but if you go a different path, that's what you're kind of suggesting.
And there's plenty of room when you're out on like a skiers. One of the other questions I have, when we investigate for utility right of way is I don't know how the, transmission lines and stray voltage, because that was an issue years ago when we tried to do it. We couldn't even touch our portable fencings because the voltage, the stray voltage was so strong that we couldn't get our hands on the fence. So, but it's for a really high, I think for, small lines, it would work fine, but I think it's something that has to be figured out. So there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot we don't know that we need to learn, but.
So right now, what are they using under power lines? Herbicides?
Yeah.
So there's another carbon
Correct.
safety thing there because you diminish quality of soil and its ability to sequester CO2 when you apply biocides to
We're
it
using fossil fuels to.
as well.
So that becomes an issue. Obviously, the animals would have trouble grazing on plants that have been exposed to herbicides. But Washington Electric doesn't use herbicides. They use weed whackers and chainsaws. So they may be a first place to start. So I what I hear is kind of to Roger's vision of a think tank, that instead of just the innovation center giving the money to a farm to do a pilot and take all the risk of figuring all this out while you're trying to farm at the same time, we'll be behind working with a farmer to provide, to backstop the work with it and really take the risk. So the Institute will own the collars, and if it doesn't work, then, the bird is taken off.
One more question. So is there a way to avoid the cellular connection? Is there another tool or device that would eliminate that as I don't have cellular?
Yeah, great question. So there's one of the four companies does a broadcast system. So it's more cumbersome. So I was hoping if I could have raised a lot of money to pilot both of them at the same time. You go with the Army, you got it.
Representative, react to that question.
What, do you have a potential cost for this system?
Yeah, so the cattle collars are $300 a piece, plus a subscription for the software. So, it's a little bit, you buy the razor and the blades. They make their money on the annual subscription, but the subscription is about $20 a piece a year, so it's not terrible. So that's about the cost per animal. For cattle, the sheep and goat collars are $200 a piece instead of 3, so they're less. And so I have different budgets for the different pilots. There was one pilot around just trees donation, and then when I submitted a budget for the DBIC, obviously it's a different budget. So the CREES program was 2 farms. DBIC adds another 2 farms, so we're basically up to 5 farms. There's 4 dairy farms and 1 beef farm at this point that I've got funded in and around $100,000 for the total. So if the legislature, what is in the Senate budget is $150,000, and that will expand out into sheep and goats. Trying to do another 2 cattle farm, because then it's a more complete cattle project, and I've got a budget for that as well. You know, it includes technical support. The UVM extension will be involved as well. NOFA and MOFGA are also involved to do some education. So that's what builds out the budget.
John?
So this committee went on a field trip at Fairmont Farm, and I never knew, but they have crawlers now that monitor their cows' cud chewing and steps for health things.
Yeah. Got a Fitbit going there.
Right, exactly. So I was just wondering, are cows gonna be, covered with a lot of bling? I can just exactly, right.
Yeah.
Or possibly like high tension lines. I mean, there's a lot of radio waves going through the cow's neck.
One piece that the collars at this point don't work for milking cows. So they're only for the grazing animals. So that reduces that complexity. They're working on making it applicable to milking cows as well as non-lactating cows. At that point, I think the answer we've got so far is there's no issue of having 2 collars, but to your point, animals at some point are going to say enough is enough to the blink. So we don't have that issue with our initial piloting. So
why
kind
not
of
dairy
what-
cows? Just because, some of them graze.
yeah, it's analogous to the animals bump into things and the collars get damaged.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. They started with that in Europe, trying to have the whole herd, that's I think the company's got enough demand for this for just grazing animals, but I'm trying to position this so that we can be part of their piloting for adapting the technology to that next iteration, because obviously it would have a much broader application. So that's where I'm trying to position the institute with the company.
Is the assumption that the young will stay with the mothers and they don't wear a collar?
No, everybody's got to wear a collar.
Yeah, they all.
And do they have smaller sized ones for lambs? Well,
Yes.
How much do the collars weigh?
Well, I don't know the answer.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I will say,
Let's see, there's a picture.
yeah, maybe they have. But just in the years of going to conferences and seeing different models and seeing different ones, by far, these were best.
So there's a battery in each collar.
Yeah.
So there's whatever that weighs, and then
You see the collar right there? Oh, it's in the,
Yeah.
it can't weigh too much.
I mean, 10 ounces or?
it's probably in the pounds.
Or now you can
It's
see.
battery.
Representative Graham's got a question.
No.
No, comment?
Probably a lot less.
What's really great too, you could have a,
Hey, doesn't look like it weighs too much.
No, usually not.
It's gotta be the battery.
That's what's underneath.
Yeah, that's it.
yeah,
It looks like a cowbell.
yeah. I mean, some of them used to wear great big bells.
That's why
Where's the photovoltaics? In the collar?
Yeah, it's in the collar.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the beauty of this is you could have right in the center of your pasture, you could have a swampy area, maybe with some rare plants, and you can draw a circle around that. And
That's what got me started. Because that's where trees at.
We're gonna super not.
It's 3.18 pounds per cattle.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was in kilograms.
And you had to count.
Yeah.
Did all that, that's very.
I see what it answered real quick.
Yes.
Representative O'Brien.
Well, also, it would be a way, I noticed that my mother and her partner have Scottish Highland cows, very hard to catch, because they're essentially wild. So could this be used as essentially a paddock?
can.
well, we're going to find that out because we're going to try that out on one of these trial farms we're about to go to. They don't have handling equipment. So,
Or corral.
or corral. So he's, for getting the colors on them, we're going to get them loaded onto their stock trailer and get them on. But then he's hoping that he'll be able to create a handling area.
Interesting.
So in the minute or so that we've got left, I'm wondering whether you've had a chance to think about the sort of upside potential and if the pilot demonstration project suggests that, this works, but how big an impact could it have, statewide or beyond? I guess we're thinking statewide.
Yeah. Well, no, the Institute is basically piloting in Vermont with rollout to the Northeast. The Innovation Center requires regional. So we have 2 farms in Maine. So, Kimberly has a better sense than I of, at this point, rotational grazing is where we're at. So that's one frame of reference. But the second is, over time, one would think that the technology is adaptable to milking cows. And at that point, you can think about broadening this out quite a bit. But I would also say that, this is the first pilot. What Roger has, invested in me is a vision that this is really, it's the technology, right? This is a pilot of technologies that can promote the viability of smaller scale farms in Vermont. So much bigger, potential at that point.
I think we'd see the land use much better because one of the problems that always happened with, especially with dairy farms, most people take their young stock because they just don't have the time to deal with them. And either they have leased land somewhere far away or another farm and just dump them off in the spring and they come back in the fall, maybe check them once or twice over the summer. So they get a huge area usually and overgraze it. Because even what a lot of people don't understand is that even though you might have more square footage in a larger area, it can still be overgrazed. In fact, it's probably it's worse. The animals will quickly become like humans do, dessert eaters. They just go for dessert.
And then the reverse is true too. The smaller amount of land you have, but if you're rotating, you can put more stock on.
Yes.
So this could increase stocking rates.
That's so a lot of micro and macro potential for impact. In 10 seconds, if I could, if you put my 2 hats together, I'm working above the line with price, I'm working below the line with cost. They're both pivotal to sustainability of dairy farms. At some point, if I could come back and make my pitch for regulation, I know you've run out of time this year, but at some point.
We haven't run out of time. We're
Okay.
still here. So.
Roger and I have been at that for 6 years. We've been working on that initiative together for 6 years, and we're 2 years to this one. So,
Good. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I think not seeing anything else, I think we'll stop there. We're supposed to be on the floor in 2 minutes.
Yep.
Well, why don't we see